Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk to you about what you should do when your game doesn't sell. We've all been there. Well, I've been there. I did a whole video, in fact, on data about my games, talking about their sales figures and how it doesn't always seem to correlate with critical reviews or team size or budget or any of that. The video is linked below in the description. But I want to talk to those few of you who are going to make games and they're not going to sell very well. Now, I realize some of you aren't going to make games. That may be even be the majority of you. And then a few of you are going to make only games that sell remarkably well. This video is not for you unicorns. It's for developers like me and the rest of you who are going to make games that aren't going to sell well. And you're left thinking, what was that about? And I'm going to talk about it, but let me just warn you, there's going to be a lot of people who just wade in and say, yeah, you made a bad game, you should make a better one. Which, I've done a whole video about people who say games are bad, and it's linked below. And what they really mean is they didn't like it, even though they may couch it as, no, it was an objectively bad game, and watch me prove it. And I don't know what to say to these people because I've pointed out that there are games on Steam that some people liked, even though a lot of people didn't. There are a lot of games that many people love, but a few people have real strong objections to and don't like. So throw out all the whole idea of a bad game or a good one. And besides, those kind of things are completely unconstructive. I'm going to try to give you constructive ways of looking at a game you've made that didn't sell like you wanted to, and you want to improve going through the process the next time. So let's look at why games don't sell. I'm going to talk about reasons that have to do with the game, and then reasons that have nothing to do with the game itself. And some of these you can control and some you can't. And that depends on your situation. So let's talk about game reasons that a game didn't sell well. Probably the biggest one is it's buggy. And that's what reviewers will say and game players will say. It's buggy. Sometimes this is code bugs. It may crash. It may run really slow. There may be actual errors in the code. Now, running slow can also be from other reasons. And a real common one is an artist made a model that was too many polys or too big of textures, or a level designer threw so much stuff into a scene that the engine can't possibly keep up. That doesn't have to do with the programmers. It has to do with tools the programmer made that then other people abused. I've talked about that with scripts, Arcanum scripts. I tried to make sure that you couldn't make a loop. People found a way of making a loop. In most of the modern engines, like Unreal, there are blueprints, and anybody can make a blueprint, and it can lead to literal bugs in the game, but that's not a programmer doing that. But the programmers will get blamed. Sorry, programmers. So in addition to bad code and bad scripts, a little more about scripts. You may see a lot of things in the game, like a creature doesn't spawn correctly, or an item doesn't show up where it's supposed to, or you go to turn in a quest and the game doesn't recognize you've completed the quest. Those are usually bad conditions in a script somewhere, and people will go, oh, that's super buggy. Yes, but that's not a programmer. That's usually conditions in a script somewhere that a non-programmer put in. And then finally, there can be design flaws that look like bugs, but really, the programmer and the scripters and the artists and everything did exactly what the design document said, and there's a problem in the game. I've done that. Arcanum had numerous flaws that were in the base design document. So everything was made exactly the way it was written in the design document, especially the places I wrote in the design document, but the problem, the bugs in the game were in the design, not the implementation of the design. So those are all the ways the games can be buggy. But there are some other reasons a game cannot sell well that have to do with the game, that have nothing to do with the implementation per se. And I'll categorize all that as niche. You may make a game with a setting that just doesn't have broad appeal. There's not a lot of people out there interested in playing a, multi-dimensional being that likes to clean houses. Or you may make a story that just has limited appeal. People can't relate to the characters. Characters are a good example of, if you have characters that people find hard to relate to, it may make your game have a limited appeal. It's not bad, but that's why it's not selling well. Similarly with mechanics, you may decide to make an isometric game, and people think, sorry, that's over. You may make a turn-based game, and people don't like those as much as real time. Or you may pick an art style that a lot of people are like, I don't really like that art style. It's not that it's bad. It's just that you've incredibly limited the scope of people who would be interested in your game in the first place, and then your sales are low. So if you decide to go with something that's niche, understand that if this doesn't catch on, it's going to stay niche, and you're going to appeal to a very small number of people. So those, I think, are the two biggest reasons games don't sell well. They're either buggy, in all the different ways I said they could be buggy, or they're niche, so they just don't appeal. But there's a couple other reasons games cannot sell well that have nothing to do with the game itself. The first one has to do with timing, when the game was released. Maybe the market was saturated with games, and it's just, there were so many games people could have bought that they bought other games besides yours, or that it diluted the market. Sometimes games cannibalize on each other. So a lot of games went out. Any one of those games would have sold well, but because there's 10 of them, they all sold It can also happen if it's a seasonal game. If you're putting out a holiday-themed game in July or a beach game in the winter, it may not sell well just because people aren't in the mood for that style of game at that time. And then another timing issue that happens frequently is you put out a game, but a similar game came out to yours around the same time. Maybe it's 2 fantasy RPGs, or maybe it's 2 FPSs set in a very similar setting. And the other one did good and yours didn't. It's sometimes a similar game can just outperform yours. If you had come out a year earlier or a year later, your game would have done better. Timing. And then related to that is marketing. There's a whole bunch of ways marketing can fail to support a game. There can be too little marketing. There's very few ads, very few ways people are even made aware your game exists. The ads can be not very good. Either they don't look good, they don't attract anyone's attention, or they show your game in a way that isn't really what your game is about, so you're not attracting the people who would want to play your game. Also, they may not be placed in the right place. They may be put on sites where people who want to play your game don't tend to go to those sites, so it's a demographic thing. You basically miss the demographic. All this boils down to discoverability, which I have a whole video about, and I'll link it below. And discoverability is becoming harder and harder as more games come out. It is just, the market has so many games that finding your game is becoming harder and harder, which is making marketing more and more important. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but what do you do in a world where 25,000 games come out a year? It's hard to find your game among 25,000. So, those are the game and non-game reasons, the biggest ones that I can think of. Now you have to figure it out. Your game is shipped, and you want to figure out why didn't it sell. Well, which of these apply to your game? Lots of people will give you different reasons. And remember, I've talked about how failure is an orphan. When your game doesn't sell, there'll be a lot of finger pointing. People go, you didn't implement it right, and your design was horrible, and marketing sucked, and all this. It's going to be hard to tell, and people will not agree on this. But even if you can get them to agree, there's usually multiple reasons, and they disagree on the weighting. Like, yeah, I agree the design wasn't that good, but you guys, your implementation, it crashed a lot. That was probably why most people were put off from the game. So even if you can get people to agree on the reasons, they won't agree on the weighting or the priority of those reasons. It's really hard to be objective about it too. You're not going to want to blame yourself. Publishers aren't going to want to blame themselves. It wasn't our marketing. Players aren't going to say, oh yeah, I bought a game and I just wasn't into it. Nope, it's a bad game. Even though I think everybody who liked it is a stupid idiot paid shill. Because I didn't like it, it must be a bad game. It's just so hard to come up with an objective reason. So you're going to hear a lot of things, and a lot of them are going to be subjective. You're going to have to try to tease out the objective reasons your game didn't sell and try to assign weights to them. Because you have to do your best at this stage. Don't get discouraged. Try to figure it out. If I had gotten discouraged from a bad game or even negative advice, there'd be no Fallout. There would be no Troika and any of those games. I would have left the industry after making Grand Slam Bridge, which I didn't even get credits on. I should have just gone, oh, I'm done. So I'm just saying, do your best. Learn from the game when it doesn't sell. Try to focus on what reviews are saying, what people are saying when it's constructive. If they just go, it's bad, just go, okay, and move on. When people are saying, oh, I didn't like how this feature worked, or I wish it had had this feature, which a lot of other games in this genre have, focus on those. And then, for the ones you can control, try to do better next time. There will be some you can't control. Maybe you can't control your marketing department. Maybe you weren't in control of deciding the setting of the game. Pick the ones you can control, try to figure out what you can do better on the next game, and make a next game. If you get discouraged early, like I said, 44 years and counting in this industry, there were many times people said, your games were terrible, you should stop. You wouldn't have had a lot of the games that came subsequently, and I guarantee there's people out there who like some of the ones that came out subsequently. So I'm begging you, if you make a game that doesn't sell, treat it as a learning experience. Try to figure out why it didn't sell, what you can control, and what you can do better next time. And I guarantee you're going to have a hit eventually.